So Dante, I think that journey down into Dante's Inferno is a descent into that entropy pit.
I agree.
You know, and then at the bottom, and I saw this in my therapeutic practice a lot too, Dante put the betrayers right by Satan, right? And so imagine that you engage in one of those sins of omission in the situation that you just described. Well, that means that you've betrayed yourself, right? Because you've betrayed your capacity for transformation. I think that's that mysterious sin against the Holy Ghost, is that you've now divorced. If you divorce yourself, yeah, well, because it's the sin that can't be forgiven, right? And so you think, what the hell is that? It's like, well, if you violate the spirit of transformation itself, then how in the world could you possibly recover from that? Because you foreclosed off any, and then like in your scenario there was a painful realization of inadequacy on part of the self, because Murdoch's character would now have to think, okay, not only did I make this mistake that's really hurt my relationship with my daughter-in-law and caused her some suffering and elevated me morally as well in comparison to her, but maybe I did that with a bunch of other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and God only knows how many discontinuities that placed in my life, but maybe there's a reason that has to do with me, like a certain kind of blindness, right? Willful blindness that might be associated with that. Because the payoff for her, that's the secondary gain of the Freudians. The payoff for her was that she got to be falsely elevated morally over her daughter-in-law, and even worse, that she was punishing her for that authenticity that would be her own pathway out of her misery.
I think,
right, so who the hell wants to go through that? That's a metanoia, but it's always down. This is the problem with learning, I think, is that before you transfigure, there's a dissolution into an entropic state. That's that descent into chaos.
Well, you see that in insight. Entropy goes up first before you get the reduction.
Yeah, now you said that's been demonstrated.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
So it's been demonstrated, the work of Stephan and Dixon. It's very complicated, but what you can do is you can use sort of state-space math to translate like where somebody's looking or pointing a finger into like a measure of the entropy of the cognitive processes that are producing the orientation. It's the math is well established. And so
excess neural activation, is that associated with that increase in entropy?
It depends, because that's hard to measure, right?
Okay.
Because it could be it could be excitation or inhibition, and so you can't just track, right? And so, but what you get is a significant increase in entropy, and then you get, with the insight, the decrease.
I'm going to bet it'll look a lot like what we saw on Twitter around the H1B thing for the past 3 days, if you were able to measure.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I've been toying with that idea, Jordan, of being able to see the insight mechanics in distributed cognition, not just in individual cognition.
Absolutely.
Well, that'd be that state of confusion, right? Where, okay, so now you've thrown an anomaly into the mix, and then everybody's chattering about how that might be reconciled.
Entropy
right?
goes up, yep.
Notice how it's governed initially primarily by the sin of omission. Like nobody actually listening to anybody else, like nobody actually stepping back, taking the stance of humility, which allows them to say, wait, maybe I'm making a mistake, maybe I'm reading you wrong. So this is part of what builds up the entropy, is the hardening of the dialogic space around something which isn't able to actually step into an appropriate level of humility to allow the insight to land.
Well, that's like a definition of tyranny.
I want to pick up. I want to pick up on the humility thing.
Yeah.
So one of the things, Kaplan and Simon found, it was predictive of insight, is a thing they called the notice invariance heuristic, which is what you have to do when you need an insight is, so the advice we give people isn't actually the best advice. Think of previous instances where you solved an analogous problem. That's actually not the best, because what you need is to think of previous instances where you failed to solve the problem. Now, why? Yeah, good. That's exact, because what you do is you look for what you have failed to change, what you kept invariant across all your failures, and that's the thing you should probably change in your current situation.
That's that too. So that's why the tyrant doubles down in the Exodus story, right?
So humility.
As the anomalies mount, which is exactly what happens in life, right?
And all over the place in our world right now.
Yeah. So, okay, so...
I just want to make one point.
Okay.
I think humility is the virtue of identifying with finite transcendence. Humility is not despair, and it's not hubris. Humility is a confidence in a recognition of a reality that transcends you, but a confidence that you can nevertheless address it.